Now that you have completed watching all of the videos in this class, and now that you know all the table concepts, let's take a look at how we might apply them in real life. Like presented with a situation, what do you do? How do you decide anything goes in table or not? And then if it does go into a table, what type of table do you use? What format do you use for your table? So let's take a look at that in this video. So let's say your content editor of your website or your copywriter of your website has presented you with a nice little paragraph, which is something like this on your screen, and it has all the data that's required. Now the easiest thing, as you would have known by now, is to just wrap it up in a paragraph tag, right? So we just wrap it up in a p tag, and I can just refresh the browser, and there you go. So your information is readily available in your on your HTML page, right? This is obviously the easiest thing to do, but you would have noticed that although this is the easiest thing to do, it is very difficult to read information, to parse information from this paragraph. You have to read the entire paragraph to know what the paragraph is about, what the content is about, and what are the numbers and what is the information that's been presented to you. Now instead of a paragraph, instead of using a paragraph, what you could do is instead see if you can put this content into a table. Now this is average rainfall received over a few years in a three year block from 2005 to 2017, and all of this, there's basically rainfall information in this paragraph. So one way of presenting this information is by using a simple table. Now this is of course much better than the paragraph, right? You can clearly see that this table tells you the average rainfall that's received, and you have for each year you have that particular amount of rainfall received. Now while this is easier to read and technically you have put information into a table, I would not recommend using a table if your table only consists of one column, right? So this is, according to me, not the right way to use a table. And the reason is because although you have your column and multiple rows, but in terms of conveying the information, we are still not using the table to its full capacity. Now what you could instead do is split the year and rainfall data into two individual columns. So let's take a look at this table. Now this is a much better view, isn't it? I can clearly see that the first column is all the years and the second column is the rainfall, and I can map each year with the rainfall. Now this to me is the right way to use a table. So this having the information used and displayed in its full capacity in a table would according to me make sense and would be the right way to use a table. Now let's take a look at another example. Now over here what we have is we have two tables. As you can see, none of them are single column, so definitely the right way to use a table in these two situations. One, on the left here you have the scores per subject for each student, right? So this is like a mini report card, if you may say so. And then on the right you have, for the same students, we have the totals of combined for all the subjects. Now although the use of the table is correct, but what we've done is we have split the information into two tables. Now what happens here is we are duplicating information, right? So the first column, where the list of students, this information is being duplicated, and the context, if I put both the tables together here, if I look at both the tables together, the context for both of them is exactly the same thing. The totals really depend on the subjects, on the scores for individual subjects. So according to me, contextually, this is probably not the best way of representing your information in tables. What you instead should do is, now that you know things like row span and col span, what you should combine both of these tables into a single one. So what you could do is something like this. Now what I've done is, you have students and you have total. So at the ends the columns are exactly what this one was, right? But now what I've done is I've added the subject information, the scores for each subject in the center of the table, and I've used call span here to combine all this information and row spans for these two table headings. And then now if I see this entire table, it makes complete sense. So now if I just need to look at one table and I get the context of the table and I get all the information that this particular table represents. So this is to me the right way to use a table. Now whenever you have the opportunity to create a table, you have all these HTML tags right under the table tag that we've just watched all these videos for. It can be it grouped into two categories. One is the required tag, so you have your table tag which is required. A TR tag is basically for each row. A table heading tag is for the heading, and the table data TD tag is for the individual cells. Now these are required, but when it comes to the optional bucket here, it is up to you to decide if it makes sense to add this information. Now although it is optional, I have definitely covered in the previous videos that T head, T body and T foot, where of course foot if there is a footer, but definitely T head and T body, although it is optional, it is highly recommended to add that tag into the code. Now these things you would base your decision on if the information on the table is going to go across multiple pages, and if you need to, for example, print out the information. And if you do need to print out the information and the tabular data is going to go across multiple pages, then you certainly want the header and the footer of the table to be printed on every page. And then of course if you're adding a caption, you would want to add a caption tag, and if you want to group and style columns, then you would probably want to use a column group and a call tag as well. Now what you certainly don't want to do is use tables for layouts, because it is difficult for screen readers to read all the information from a table. And then there's the question of your separation of concerns, where you want to ideally separate layout or design from content, right? So if you are familiar with some CMS softwares like WordPress or blogger.com, you have templates in separate files, and then you have the content itself which you add. Now imagine if you had to rely on table tags for your layout. That means you would have to add table tags to your content to every page, which is obviously not the right way to do it. The other reason for not using tables as layouts, because browsers don't have to convert all your table code into the visual table that you see on the screen, right? So if you're using this for a layout, that means your browser has to wait for the entire page to load. Then it has to convert all the table information that it has detected in your HTML code into the relevant visual elements. Now although these days browsers and computers are very fast, but of course even few milliseconds of delay can affect your usage of your website. Now the solution to this is using divisions and CSS to create containers, to create those grids and containers, and then put your content inside those divisions. In HTML it is semantically correct to do so. Now the summary of all of this that we have seen, of course we've just seen two examples here, but in real life you might be presented with any sort of information, and you should be ready for that. If there's something to take away from this video, is that I would recommend you to read the content and comprehend the content before coding. Once you've comprehended the content, you think how best you would display that information on a screen. Now for some content a paragraph is the right way to do it, but for some information you do require tabular data. And as developers in real life, you are empowered to take those decisions and decide whether you want an information in one way or the other. If you do decide to go with tables and representing tabular data in that way, I would definitely recommend you to draw out a rough design of that table on a piece of paper and roughly put those elements on that piece of paper, on that design, and see what the output looks like, and see if it's readable. And if it is readable and if it is worth the effort and the time, then go ahead and code it. But if it is not, and if it doesn't make sense, and if you can't display it in a tabular format after sketching it on a piece of paper, then you may not need to display that information as a table.